Carl, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Honored. Super excited to have this conversation.
We're honored as well.
Yeah.
You have told us that when we were kind of going back and forth planning for this, you said that money plays a central role in our spiritual lives. And I was kind of fascinated by that statement, because to me, well, we're going to get way into this, but like, to me, it's at least on the periphery, if not like completely separate in many ways from my spiritual life, other than like the very specific entry points, like tithing, you know? So for you to make the claim that it's central is a fascinating claim, I think. I'd love for you to talk through that.
Yeah. There's this old saying that the checkbook and the calendar never lie. Right. And what that's pointing to is I sort of care deeply about what you tell me is important to you, but I'll tell you what's important to you if I could see how you spend your time and your money. And so I think money becomes this, I mean, I to be honest, I'll just start with a disclaimer. I don't care about money, right? I care about humans and how to live a meaningful life. And money just happens to be either a mirror or a portal into what we actually care about, right? And we can argue all day long about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's reality right now. So it is. And I also think there's all this language around money, like we use this word currency, right? And I think of that as like, and cash flow. I think money's natural state is in flow. And so watching the way it flows through our lives and how we allocate it, like you think of all these things, what's a balance sheet, right? Like that's just a reflection of what you've cared about, right? It's a reflection of what you've invested in. And then you start to think about the return you get on any investment of time. And I actually think there's 4 sources of capital, really: money, energy, time, and attention. And I think we should be paying attention to all those, but those are sources of capital that we've been entrusted with to decide how to allocate, right? And how you allocate that is a massive reflection on what you care about. So that's why I think I actually think it's the primary question of our spiritual lives.
Yeah. Let me, and Aubrey, there's so much for you to get into here. I know I'm like, I don't want to steal your thunder, but like what's interesting for me is as you say that, the emotion that is arising for me is guilt.
Yeah.
Because I'm imagining my calendar and I'm imagining my, my checkbook or whatever. Like if I'm imagining some review of all of my transactions.
You know what a checkbook is? Like,
yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes. Started out with a checkbook. But I think that what I might see is a pretty serious misalignment with my stated values.
Can I tell you a story about that?
Yeah.
So this, I've told this story enough that I don't cry anymore, right? But I only know one word, like horrific experience for me. I wrote something about that in the Times column about the checkbook and the calendar never lying. And the people from Rescue Time, that app that you can install on your computer that will tell you how you spend your time, reached out and they're like, hey, we could help you with that. And so I said, you know what, let's try a little experiment. So I said, let's install it on my computer and then I want to forget about it. Don't tell me it's there. I want to forget about it. First, I'm going to make some claims about how I spend my time. So I'll make some stated preferences. And then what you're going to give me is revealed preferences, which revealed preferences have a lot more power. So I said, look, I never check email after 5 because the kids are home. Why would I possibly do that? I don't look at it on the weekend. I care about sports, but I certainly don't spend any time on ESPN. I mean, politics, I could care less. And I would never check the other, news source, whatever the other is for you. So I made these claims. I actually wrote them down. And then we did a month, 30 days. And I just tried to behave as normal. And I'm sure I even forgot about it after a day or two. And then the actual revealed preferences came back. And I think of this, I can't help but think of a Venn diagram of this, like your money and your life. And you hope that they look like
a circle,
a circle. But often there's actually a gap between them. And this was a revelation of a huge gap of inauthentic behavior, right? And you're pointing to this too, around the shame of this inauthentic behavior, because I was horrified by like how much time I actually spent on ESPN, how much time I actually spent on political sites, which I don't care about. At least apparently I do. I do. And then at the same time, I remember telling my daughter You know, my daughters, probably all of them during that 30-day period, and my son, like, I don't have time for that mountain bike ride. Right? On my 1-page financial plan, my statement of financial purpose is time with my family, mainly outside, and service in my community. That's what's most important to me. And I think anybody who knows me would tell you that's what it says, but they don't know, they didn't see this behavior. And I can tell you right now where that changed. Like, all we have to do is pull up your screen time for a minute.
Yeah,
totally.
Right. And so what do we do when there's no overlap in the circle? Well, the first thing we do is, like, we can feel that guilt, right? And hopefully we can move it from shame to guilt, and we can metabolize it, like, let it all come through us, like, process it all, and then practice. Like anything we're not good at, let's just give ourselves the grace of saying, I'm not good at that. And how do you get better at something that you're not good at? You practice. And so you slowly find time. And when you see the overlap, you celebrate. And every once in a while, you'll see a perfect overlap, like Christmas Eve. You know, you might see and you can say, oh, that's amazing. And the next day, when you say, where did all these presents come from? And you get angry and there's a gap again, you can say, oh, yeah. But what we have to stop doing is running from that gap, like running from that information, running from inauthentic behavior. Because, like, and what's an interesting question to sort of think about is, who do you have in your life that has permission to enter that gap with you? Right? Who do you have in your life that could expose you to that inauthentic behavior quietly? Like, you know, there's a strong disincentive to not point that out to me, right? Because it may hurt.
Yeah.
And I think we just need more of that. So the fact that you feel that way, I would just sort of, right, like, pay attention to that and say, okay, interesting, not guilt or shame or blame, just, wow, that's interesting. What could I do slightly different to get some alignment today, some alignment tomorrow, right? That's how I would approach that.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. That, of course, that's, and maybe that's a really useful, it's useful to feel guilt in the, like, it's a signal that there's some misalignment happening there.
Totally.
But I'm super intrigued that in a lot of, well, you've written about this in a lot of your podcast conversations, you'll start with this question about, you know, what's the first word that comes to mind when you see a dollar sign or when you think of money, or what's the first experience that you remember when you had this emotion around money. And it feels like for a lot of people, there's some deep history at play that is also creating a negative emotion around money. And so I'd love for you to talk about that, because that was very clear to me when the very first sketch in your book is this page that just says money equals feelings.
Yeah.
And I knew the word instantly when I saw that sign. Word? It, for me, actually was guilt. And this is interesting because Tim's was
mine
was
anxiety.
Yours? Anxiety.
Yeah.
But guilt was mine. Like, I knew it before I, like, finised the first sentence.
Oh, well, I'm taking over now.
I knew this.
I told him he's going to do that thing.
Just tell me a bit more about that. Like, what was is there a precipitating event that came with it?
Well, yeah, but the interesting thing was it wasn't obvious. It was just at some point, I don't remember if it's in that chapter or if I was just doing this with your guests in the podcast. But you ask about what's the first experience that you remember with money. And truly, I thought these things were separate. And then it was so obvious. I don't know how I've never connected them, but one of my very earliest memories, like very early, was being with my very best friend, and we were in kindergarten. And I remember her telling me that her family was poor, and we were eating cereal. And I remember being like, I shouldn't use all this milk.
Stop it.
Yeah. And, like,
that's so good.
But that was little, you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
How old were you?
We were in kindergarten. So
my whole goal was to get you to cry. It only took 5 minutes.
I don't think I'd ever even, like, consciously brought that memory back, but, like, I knew it when you asked that question, and I thought, like, wow, I have found a way to justify guilt my whole life about money.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was about not having enough, so I feel guilt about how I'm spending it. Yeah. Sometimes it's about having enough and feeling guilty about how I'm spending it. Yeah. Like, it's just, that's been I fill the guilt box, and I carry it with me in any context.
Can we do one more thing? Like,
yes.
How back then and now, what does that feel like in your body?
It feels like tightness everywhere, like anxious,
clenching.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think, well, first of all, thank you.
Thank you.
I've heard so many stories like that are like the simplest little things where you're just like, I just yesterday I was with a friend who told me this story about, right, he remembers sitting on the top stair, like his bedroom was upstairs, stairs go down, and the stairs ended, the landing of the stairs right there was the kitchen sort of family room. And he remembers sitting on the top stairs, and he remembers almost being so little that his feet were swinging. I'm sure that, I mean, because that's only that high, but like that's the recollection he has. And there may be some sort of groundlessness to that. And he remembers sitting up there. His first memory of money is sitting there listening to his parents argue over how they're going to pay the rent. Right. And you can sort of feel, and he said the same thing, sort of like tightness. And I think if we start paying attention to the reason I think the feeling in the body is so important is if we can start paying attention to the feeling in the body early on, that feeling will tell us something's going on long before our heads will catch up. Right. And so and I think what we can do is, instead of trying to resist the stimulus, like I will never drink milk again. You know what I mean? Right, instead of trying to resist the stimulus, we can start to notice, because that which you resist persists, right? Like resisting the stimulus will just make it stronger. We can start to notice the stimulus and rewire the response a bit, right? And a rewiring of that response could look like looking back at, how old?
5. Yeah,
looking back at 5-year-old Aubrey and saying, hey, thank you. And we got it from here. Like it, because that was probably a useful, something about that was useful. And now it's become a little maladaptive. Right. And so I love that idea. Let me tell you just real quickly an experience I've had, and I've only uncovered this recently. I noticed for like, I didn't notice for probably a decade. And then I started to notice that for over 20 years, I would walk to the mailbox and feel, and we lived, most of the time we've lived in places where you had a little bit of a walk, you know, whatever that was, even if it was just 100 yards. And I would notice, I actually didn't notice for more than a decade, but I noticed recently that I'd been doing that. And I would, particularly when I'd open the mailbox, I'd feel a little clinched, and especially if there was a letter from anybody related to the tax service, IRA. And I had no reason for that, you know, but anything, the bank, the bills, anything. And if it was from the IRS, I just tore it open. You know, if it's from the state of Utah tax commission, I just tore it open. Because and the reason I noticed this is like 6 months ago, I ripped one of those open, and it was a change of address request. You know what I mean? Like, that was super benign. And then a couple months later, I had one from the state of Utah tax. I opened it, and it was a refund I had forgotten about. Like, it was positive, but I was feeling all this anxiety, and I was telling my dad that on this Father's Day. And he said, "What do you mean you don't know?" Essentially. I was like, "Well," he's like, "You don't really know the story?" And then he told me about an experience he had with a tax problem that he'd run into, you know, years ago, that once he told me, I kind of remembered the periphery of it, but I had no context for it. And so now I can notice on the way to the mailbox, like, and I can say, hey, like, maybe that feeling kept me safe in some weird way. I don't know, but now I don't need to worry about that. It's just mail, you know, and probably positive mail, at least neutral. So I think that's the first step to starting to unwind that stuff. Yeah.
So
okay.
powerful.
Well, wait. Anxiety.
Anxiety. Oh, here we go.
Where? Just quickly, like, curious.
I was talking with Aubrey about this on the way down. I think, I don't know if it goes as like, as far back as childhood for me necessarily. Yeah. Like we had enough. I never felt.
How did you know that? Curious about that.
Actually, I'm very sort of like mathematical, and I remember actually my parents leaving Quicken open on the computer one time, and I saw their their checking
checked
account.
It out.
Yeah,
like some sort of forensic account.
I mean, I wasn't like deep in it, but I saw the number and I was like, yeah, it seems fine. You know? Like, it really, I don't want to say the number, but like from my,
you remember the number?
I remember the order of magnitude.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And like I think from time to time, you know, it felt a little tight, but like my parents were and are, you know, just very stable people. They just, you know, and I'm very, you know, grateful for that in a lot of ways. I had delusions of grandeur from very early ages. Like I remember in high school, my friends and I, a couple in particular, talking about how much money we were going to make and what cars we were going to drive. And so I think, I got back from my mission, and I think it became clear to me that the people that made tons and tons of money were entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And so I had this goal to be an entrepreneur, and we got married really quick, like 6 months after I got home. Aubrey was a couple years ahead of me in school because I'd been on a mission, and she graduated, got a job teaching as I was, and essentially, sugar mamaed me through my last couple of years of school. I started a business. It was not, this is in my naivete with a friend. We didn't really at that point know too much about what we were doing. And when we had, right around the time I graduated, we had our first baby. Aubrey quit her job as a teacher to stay home with our daughter. And it was on me all of a sudden, and this little business. And the business was not enough to provide for us. But maybe I should, I don't know. I don't necessarily regret this looking back, but it probably would have been more responsible for me to go get a job. I could have probably, but I think again, the delusions of grandeur, I just had this, I had this thing. And so it was push through, it's going to be terrible for a while, and then we'll pull out of it and it'll all be worth it in the end. But that produced a couple of really bad years, I think we made $10,000 one of those years. We racked up credit card debt. And for me in that time period, money all of a sudden became a source of extreme anxiety, because it also seemed like no matter how hard I worked, I wasn't seeing, and I was working very hard, I wasn't seeing the return. And so I think a lot of my money issues actually come out of that period of my life, more so than childhood.
Sure. That's amazing. I have so many questions. I'm super curious about the word, it would have been the more responsible thing to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's super fascinating about that. And then, I was working really hard, but wasn't getting the results. It's so interesting how much we link our thinking and our effort to some external success metric, right? And how easy that, it's deep in our culture, right?
Totally. It is.
And even more the entrepreneur startup culture, it's deep in that culture too.
I think my Latter-day Saintism is built into this in a lot of ways.
Sure.
We have this weird tension. I was reviewing some of the famous scriptures about money as I was preparing for this conversation. On one side, you've got Jesus, saying it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. On the other hand, I was just reading this one this morning, Alma 129. There's so much to dissect here. And now, because of the steadiness of the church, they began to be exceedingly rich, having abundance of all things whatsoever they stood in need. Flocks, herds, fatlings, abundance of grain, gold, silver, precious things, silk, fine twined linen, all manner of good, homely cloth. And so there's a lot of, in the Book of Mormon in particular, there's a lot of keep the commandments, prosper in the land. I feel like what we would normally do on Faith Matters would be well, what does prosper in the land really mean? You know, but this verse is so explicit. It's the stability of the church led them to all these very specific riches. And so what are we supposed to do with all of this? I know. That's the question. What are we supposed to do with all of this?
Yeah, let's just add one more to the mix that I've been fascinated by. In John, you remember that moment when Mary anoints the Savior with what breaks open the alabaster thing, basically her safety deposit box, that whole story.
Yes.
And one of the disciples is upset, and it was Judas. And the narrator, I'd never noticed this. The narrator, John, says because they say something like, what a waste. Wouldn't this been better to give this money, sell this and give this money to the poor? And John says, Judas wasn't angry because he cared about the poor. I've never known, it's so explicit. Judas wasn't angry because he cared about the poor. He was a thief and he held the bag. That's the language in that, he was a thief and I said the same thing. And he held the bag, and I was like, wait a sec. Now, look, we don't know any of this, but this is the story I choose to tell, right? Which is either Jesus didn't know he had appointed a thief as the CFO of the whole organization, the movement, right? Either he didn't know or he was making a point. And I kind of choose to believe and again, I have no basis for this, but I kind of choose to believe the latter. Like that the point is, you think this matters? Let me show you how little this matters. Right? Like, you know what matters is love.
Oh man.
All that matters is love. And again, we don't know any of this, but we do know he didn't care because he was cared about the poor. He wasn't angry because he cared about the poor. He was a thief and he held the bag. And so I don't know what to do with any of this stuff in terms of the conflict, except that I think it's all, because we know what happens next. You know, that homely cloth turns into tinkling, whatever, like, you know, all, and we get this predictable cycle. So I don't know what to make of any of it, except that we seem to have lost the plot. And the plot, I think, if we follow what all the wisdom traditions point out, but especially Jesus, the plot is love. And so anything that gets in our way is a distraction, right? And and again, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah,
you know.
So I'd imagine you've asked thousands of people at this point, what is the feeling around money? And I bet you get a lot of answers like anxiety, guilt,
stress,
fear, stress, etc. It seems like that's an indication of having lost the plot, because we know that fear and love can't coexist, right? Yeah. And so if money is the source of fear for many people, it's preventing us from living the gospel, it seems like, in a real way.
I mean, I think we have lots of all the wisdom traditions. I mean, what was it, Brigham? My biggest fear for these people is not, you know, that they'll get run out of town or tarred or feathered. It's that they'll become rich, fat, and kick themselves out of the kingdom or whatever, and go on their way to hell. Like, it was a pretty strong quote. You know, so I don't know. I know that it seems to be the crux, at least my view is that how we use this set of resources, including money, but money, energy, time, and attention, is the crux of the test, right?
You had this really fascinating conversation with Rabbi, is it Stutman?
Stutman, yeah, that was so fun.
Oh my gosh, it was so interesting. And you brought something up. You said something about that, you know, wisdom traditions around the world teach this idea that there's some kind of
more
problem.
Money, more problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you were moving through and she kind of stops and she's like, she kind of pauses to be like, do I really believe that actually? Yeah. And what she says is, I think what I believe is more money, more possibility, less work, more problems. Yeah. And that there's sort of this, like what she was bringing to the table was just this piece around the idea that it just means you can do more. There's something, you have tools, you have like more that you can work with. And it was such a weird, like, whiplash moment, because I was totally on this train with you. Like, yes, there's danger here. And it's just really not how she saw it. So I'm curious, like I guess what you took from that conversation in particular, and is that a path forward? Because it does seem like fear becomes very restricting. I'm not sure that fear is actually steering me in a good direction necessarily. It shuts me down. Like, it closes down creativity and openness and love, because I feel tight and nervous, and I'm ironically not able to use this as an asset. Like, I think I'm less capable of imagining ways to be God's hands because I have so much anxiety around this thing. And I loved her perspective that like, this is all about possibility.
Me too. I had the same experience. I was like, whoa, because she said, and it was so kind. She said, hey, would it be okay if we investigate that a little bit? Yeah. And even the word, like, she didn't say, can I push back? She didn't say, she said, can we investigate that a little bit? She said, because I don't believe we have that. I believe we have more money, more possibilities. I think they've had more years to work this out. You know, like, I think there's so much in that tradition around the use of money, right? To the point where it's a harmful stereotype even, right? But there's so much in the Jewish tradition around the appropriate use of money. And I, you know, the verse that we throw around a lot is like, money is the root of all evil. Yeah. It's not what it says, right? The love of money. So I think it's, maybe this story would help. Austin Kleon, who wrote Steal Like an Artist, he's one of my favorite like creative thinkers. When I had him on the show, I asked him this question I've been really fond of lately. Like, if money were to come in and sit with us right now, like personified, what would you ask it? Like, what would you ask it? Right. And Austin said, he was like, whose lives have you ruined and whose lives have you made better? And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And then he said, you know what, actually, I would ask it, who has figured out how to handle you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what Rabbi Stutzman's pointing to, is like money is ultimately, we all want to get to the place, like the most enlightened state with money is neutral, right? It's just zeros and ones in the cloud at this point. It's just a tool. We want to get to that place, but we've layered all these stories about the use of milk when I'm 5, right? Like we layered, like about this level of anxiety and work and taking care of a family and all that stuff, all these stories that we've got to work through. And I think that's when it gets so messy that it turns into, I need more of that. I want more of that. And it's pretty quick to go. It's pretty easy to go from I need and want more to love. I love money. And I think that's when it starts to get to problem. This is not like, we're not talking about, I mean, sometimes people are easy to dismiss this conversation. Like, what is this communism? No, that's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like how this tools has incredible power. And I think we're dealing with another one that you just had a conversation with. Like AI has incredible power on both sides. So it's not about bad or good. It's about learning how to harness that in a way that would be for the betterment of our and other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and I think that's what she was pointing to.
Yeah.
More money, more opportunity, more possibility.
Yeah. I still feel this snag around worth and wealth though. Like and maybe that's one of those things that goes deep, but like, I think part of the tension is that you do have more possibility when you have more of this tool. And so it's easy to just link dots. And pretty soon you're looking around at all of the mission leaders and thinking like, what do they all have in common? And like, what do all of these general authorities seem to have in common? And it rolls off the tongue to mention the extremely successful careers that every apostle has had, like and so I can see how you can say, well, it's a practicality thing. They're in a position to serve because but I think the way it trickles down is this understanding that we as members of the church should look like the Romneys if we're living right, and like,
so
this is
I'm
hard.
so glad you like this has been 20 years of my work, like of trying to figure that.
Yeah.
Bumping up against that and like what to prosper in the land, like all of this stuff. Yeah. And then the people we appropriately admire and sometimes inappropriately hold up and sometimes mimetically try to be like it's so fascinating to watch how quickly a new general authority will get called and their first talk in general, you'll meet, if you have friends like this, they have the general authority voice within a couple of months and dressing similar. So there's, and it's part of that's really, really valuable and really, really important, but part of that's really dangerous. And the part that's dangerous is, they're like, how do we self-worth and my value in my community is related to my ability to make a difference, and that happens to be related to money. And if I just get my thinking right, and then you've got this whole world we have of self-help stuff that has really forwarded that thing, like embedded that level of thinking that if something's not going well in the external circumstances of my life, it's just my own thinking. And I don't know what to do with any of it. I'm just saying, as a culture, we seem to have gotten caught up in this idea that you are more valuable.
Yeah.
If you must be more righteous.
Yeah.
Right. Because it says it.
Yeah.
Misinterpretation and all, like it's just hard to get right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I was thinking about this too, I was thinking about in many ways how the church itself was born out of a context in which money mattered immensely.
Right.
Joseph Smith's family was very, very poor.
Right.
His early expeditions and treasure seeking and sort of being known in those circles as somebody that maybe had the chance of finding buried treasure. Even once he, said he had the gold plates, people thought of this as like a get rich quick scheme. And then so many trials around the bank and church debt and everything. And then, over the course of 200 years, we end up as arguably the most prosperous religion in the world. And it's just like the money stuff runs deep. Yeah. And I've wondered if you've ever, especially given that early context with Joseph Smith, and then obviously the saints coming out here and having essentially nothing, needing to build a society from the ground up, is that somehow still infused in our Mormon like ethos around money?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine there's like industry save, rainy day, frugal, food storage. Like there's so much about like storing up, and back to our earlier conversation about money's natural state being in flow, right? Like currency and cash flow and energy and, you know, all of those, there's something tricky that happens when you dam up that flow. Like when you make money stagnant, there's something tricky going on. And I think that's another, like, is so interesting. I feel like the Savior was dripping with sarcasm when he said, like, what manner of men would build a barn, fill it up, and then build another? You know, like, I think there was just a dripping and we can point to the lilies and all that stuff, and we can say, well, that was a different time. And I don't know, but I think that's letting ourselves off the hook. So I don't know what level of storing is appropriate and prudent, and what is beyond. I mean, we have some pretty strong evidence that the appropriate relationship with money is sufficient for our needs, right?
Yeah.
What is sufficient? What's over sufficient? You know, I don't, and I think this is one of the wonderful things that we've been given, is this ability to sort this all out ourselves individually, right? Like, because as soon as I heard sufficient, I was like, where's the formula? Like, could you please, like, how many minutes a day? How, you know, what is sufficient? And there's no formula except your relationship with God and your own management.
It feels like maybe just articulating these ideas and noticing them, like becoming conscious of them, is so much of the work. Like, I'm not sure it's as complicated as I want to make it feel. Like, recognizing that attention and time and energy are also currencies, you know. Like, I think even just becoming aware sometimes is what can just help you relax into this piece, that we can use this thing, but it's not attached to our worth. And I think maybe some of this is American culture too. When you can step outside of this pressure that it's the thing that matters most or that means the most about you, I think it's easy actually to let go of. When that stops becoming the context that we're all using, it feels less concrete, I think.
Yeah, I think about, and this first became evident to us. We moved to New Zealand for what was supposed to be a year, and it turned into 4. And when I'd come back, I would, and I'm not making any statement about whether this is bad or good. I actually have a very strong opinion about it, but I'm not going to make it here. When I would come back, you'd just be like, wow. I mean, only thing I could describe it was static.
Wow.
Static, like land in constant. LA, and then even here, and then the fast, and I remember my kids saying, what's that big car? Like a Suburban. You know, like, it didn't take long and how fast everything was going, and this static, and again, that's produced some remarkable results, you know, but what I've realized is we have placed money and work as the organizing principle of our lives. We'll fit the kids in. Like, we will fit our health in around it. We'll fit sleep. I'll sleep later. Right. Like, this time in my life is the time to make hay while the sun shines. Like, we've got all this cultural stuff around money, and work is the organizing. And I realized that in New Zealand, when the first 6 months I was there, everybody I'd meet, I'd ask, like, well, hey, what do you do? And one of my friends finally pulled me aside and was like, mate, we don't ask that question here. Like, I mean, we lived in the small town in the South Island, like maybe in Auckland they do, but here we ask, like, what are you doing for a holiday? Like, what did you do this weekend? How are the kids? Money and work is in the organizing principle of our lives. And I think that's super, super, super interesting.
Yeah. What do you say to someone who hears that and says, well, that would be nice, but I'm the one, you know, late at night at the kitchen table with my partner trying to figure out how to make rent, you know, for somebody this really does feel tight. And it's like, I wish I could have this expansive perspective and think about it differently or whatever. But it's just like, we're not figuring out how to make ends meet on a regular basis. Like, I think a lot of people are in that situation. I
just like deep empathy. I know, you know, and there's part of it that's systemic. And again, there's a reason that money and work is the organizing principle of life in America. It's because if I don't have it, I don't have health insurance. right? And again, not making any claim of whether that's bad or good. I'm just like, this movement from collective solutions to individual solutions has produced a sense of stress and anxiety that you can't get around. And I'm not saying whether we should do it differently. I'm just saying that is reality. The reason a lot of people feel that way is not because their thinking is wrong. It's because the system is leading to a lot of that. And so deep empathy for that, right? Like, and I think, okay, great. Thanks for the empathy. What do I do? Well, I think you just slowly chip away, right? Like you slowly start to pay attention to what's really important to you. Are there ways to make changes? Can I make big, sometimes it would require big dramatic change. Can I find wasted money? And all we can do is just chip away at those things.
Yeah. One of my very favorite sections in your book is about spending.
Yeah.
And I also noticed that's where I felt the most challenged, and it made me realize I think I have reflexively assumed that frugality itself is a value, but I think it was actually really coming from this fearful place. And I don't think it was actually about frugality. I think it was an answer to anxiety, that one way to deal with anxious feelings is just control, just spend less. That's always the answer. And so it really challenged me to think about the way spending reveals and is an expression of your values. And so I loved the exercises that you suggest for figuring that out. And it wasn't to just spend as little as possible. Right. And like, that's what I remember, listening to Dave Ramsey just religiously and being like, we just have to.
Just kidding. Can we just please get through one conversation about money without Dave Ramsey? No, I'm fine. It's fine. Oh, shit.
It was like, and I think that was also was sort of this it was about anxiety for me. Like it gave me this sense of like, there's a plan and I'm going to know exactly where every penny is going.
If I just control it and if I grip tighter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think actually it was keeping this anxiety alive, that it was always on the verge of being out of control. Yeah. And so I felt this like real sense of freedom when you talked about
the spending practice.
Yes. Yeah. So would you talk about that?
Yeah. Let me just tell you a quick story on the way into that. I remember years ago that gripped feeling. And I remember like when you want to spend money, the rubber band flipping thing. You physically flip yourself to remind. Yeah. And I remember saying to my wife one day, I'm like, we got to make this more painful. We're spending too much money. We got to make this more pain. And she was like, gosh, that sounds fun. She was like, why would we do that? And I remember this being like, yeah, that's right. Maybe this pain thing isn't the right answer. And so what I think about spending is like, imagine you had a friend. It was the earliest friend you'd ever had. So you met them in preschool. They're still the friend you spend the most time with. In fact, you see them 3 to 5 times a day, right? So you're seeing this friend all the time. Imagine that's true. And then that every time you see this friend, you feel bad about yourself, right? Like every time. And that's spending is to money, right? Like that's the relationship we have. It's like most of the time, your first interaction with money is getting a little bit and then spending it. And then your most frequent, for sure, interaction with money is spending. I mean, because it happens 3 to 15 times a day. And so and that's no way to have a relationship with anybody, right? Like every time I do it, I feel bad. Or we might get to the point, plenty of people listening would be the point where I don't feel bad. It's apathy, right? I don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. Either way, like not thinking about the friend or feeling bad about the friend is not a good way for a relationship. So I would just I think the spending practice and I think this is the best opportunity to get reps at this.
Yeah.
Right. Just practice having a better relationship with money. And I think of this as a spiritual practice, right? Like to just start paying attention. It takes 3 seconds. Like every time I spend money, because the goal is you want to become the best spender on the planet.
Right.
Like world class at spending. And the way you'd be world class at spending is by alignment, like aligning your spending with what's important to you. Right. And you'll slowly find that there are things you can completely ruthlessly cut. Yeah. And there are other things that like, maybe that's an investment, right? Maybe it's not an expense. It's an investment that produces a return. And to the degree that I can, and to the degree that my budget would allow, I'd want to spend more like on those things. And I would want to cut ruthlessly on the things over here. So the simple way to do that is just take 3 seconds every time you spend money and just simply say, and just notice. And my favorite way of noticing is just, isn't that interesting? And this first happened to me because there was a period where I was way into Jimmy John unwinches. Like if I had a choice of lunch, I would just be like, an unwich seems like a good idea. And I had like 20 of them or something over like a year. And I was walking out one day and I realized if somebody were at the door and I walked out, a little survey taker with a little clipboard and said, how much did you spend? I wouldn't have known. I knew it wasn't less than 5 and I knew it wasn't more than 20. Probably more than 15. No, 20. I'd probably say 20. Like the range was, I was like, that's fascinating. So I just started paying attention and I would just say, you just spent $9.72 on a number 9 unwich Jimmy John's. Isn't that interesting? And I would submit to you that your simple awareness will drive behavior change, especially if behavior change is not the goal. So don't make it the goal. This is shame and blame free budgeting. Like fine, if you like budgeting and you like Quicken, keep doing it, please. That's amazing. But for the 97% of the people listening who don't like it, just try paying attention.
Yeah.
Just simple awareness. And I think not only does that produce some help with the budgeting thing, like it just helps you practice paying attention, which we could certainly talk about, like the value of the source of capital called attention. But that's the spending practice.
I love that so much. I think the way you put it in the book was something about like the goal is to spend lavishly on the things that you actually care about, and then ruthlessly cut the things that you don't. Yeah. And that just, I totally agree. Like because it just felt like this big cloud of anxiety, I think it was more like fasting, just like go as long as you can without eating. And then like you
just blow up.
Yes. Yeah. And this, I love this feels so much more aligned. I really love that idea. And back to this conversation with Rabbi Sussman, this one keeps coming back to me, but she said something about how every penny you spend is in some way like a religious decision, or I don't remember exactly how a religious act. Yeah. Which I think you could hear with a lot of anxiety, but the way she meant it, I thought was so beautiful. And she connected it to tithing, this like very expansive view of tithing. And her example was, if you're going to spend extra on an ethically produced piece of clothing or meat or so, like you're going to spend extra, like that's an ethical decision that you're making. That's a spiritual values-based choice. And to her, that was like tithing. That was like, she was tithing that money. It was God's money that she's using in this way that felt so aligned with her values. And I love that. I loved thinking of money in that way. Like I think it relaxed anxiety. And it also just opened up the way a simple daily decision can be like soul food. Like that can be such a connecting experience, actually, to think of like, I'm using this money so intentionally that I'm choosing to spend more where I really care, as opposed to just like clenching and resisting and then spending as little as possible where it might not even matter, like where it might not count.
I don't know. I have like a problem with fancy feelings, like meaning like I care deeply about what kind of bike I buy or what kind of shoe, and I wish I didn't. And I have a fancy feelings budget, and sometimes my wife is like, you've blown the budget, bro. Like you can't think so deeply about what kind of rake from Home Depot you're gonna get, right? But I think I uncovered years ago, for myself at least, that I don't make enough money to buy cheap stuff. Right. And what I mean by that was, and I can't remember if the example's in the book, but we bought a pair of, do you remember Moonstone? Do you remember the outdoor company Moonstone?
No.
This is like the predecessor to Arc'teryx, probably. Like they were making really, really nice clothing that was far more expensive than, whatever, ski pants. And I remember when we were first married, it was within the first year. We both skied a lot. My wife was a ski instructor at Snowbird, and I ski and backcountry ski a lot. And I needed a new pair of pants. And I remember the Moonstone bibs were way more but I was just like, I can't buy this piece of garbage that I'm gonna have to replace. And I was like, I'm just gonna save and buy the more expensive pants. My kids are wearing them. My 28-year-old daughter skis in those pants now. Right. And so it was far cheaper than the garbage ones. Now, some places, where this doesn't matter, printers. I tried to make it matter. I was like, is there a German made printer that it doesn't, like, so there are some places where that doesn't matter, and other places, and I think you just have a fancy feelings budget and pay attention to it. But to your point, that's an alignment decision, right? I'd rather buy a pair of jeans that are going to last a lot longer. It's both in alignment with my values. I actually, every time I touch them, I feel good. There's a sense of quality. There's a piece to me of this that's like, my great grandfather, I bet, traded, or great great grandfather, probably like put his life energy into making something. And then he met with somebody else who put their life energy into making something, and they traded it while they looked in the eyes. And I think our distance from that is causing this problem around greed and wars and resource scarcity. And I think it's like, if we could just get reconnected with source of capital and how we use it, I think it would go a long ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do you think about abundance? And like, I know it really affects how you actually use the dollars and cents, but do you have a way of keeping your mind in this place of abundance when it comes to something that feels like you can really measure it? Like, you can measure it.
It's really funny. I was just thinking of my kids who will all listen to this. And they're my dad abundant, like, because I've been so scarce and worried and fearful for so long. Like, it's only the last 3 to 5 years where I've had the ability to unwind a bit of that. Like, there's been a lion in every bush my whole life. Really? Right? Like, hyper alert, always on guard, every rear view mirror all the time. And what I've learned from that is that it's just a matter of perspective. Like, you can take somebody with it's so interesting to be like, you go to a movie together, you're sitting right next to each other. You walk out of the movie and maybe see some friends, and they ask you how the movie was, and you hear Aubrey describe the movie, and you're like, what movie were you in? You know, or a car accident, you're standing together on a corner with somebody else, and you read both police reports. And I think that there is some, I want to be careful with the use of the word choice, but there's some practice that we can develop to slowly learn to see that abundance is a function of perspective. I remember President Oaks talking about a hurricane in Florida, and I can't remember when this was. It's got to be 20 years ago. Like, a hurricane in Florida, and the newspaper article had interviewed a couple different families, and he was just pointing out that one family was super angry and upset and disappointed and discouraged, and the family next to them was saying, we're just so glad that we're all alive. And now this family may have a bunch of money saved up, and this family may not. I don't know the details, but it pointed to the idea that there's some ability to practice, choosing to see what we already have. My wife said to me the other day, I was complaining about something, and she's very good at just being like, get over yourself. And I was complaining about something, and she said, if somebody were to follow you around and take pictures of your life and put them on Instagram, you saw them, you would be jealous. And I was like, yeah, I guess that's true. And I think no matter what our situation is, maybe we can always look to find something like that and practice that. Yeah. I think that's all I've got on it, because I don't know another, but that doesn't mean that there's a really bad juvenile version of this. Right. And it was in the book, The Secret, the worst book, the most harmful book ever written about money. I'll just go on record, because it was pointing to something. Don't send me any emails about it. I've already gotten them all. It's fine. Like, the reason it was so harmful is it was pointing to something that's true. Like, the law of abundance is a correct principle. Like the law of attraction and having an abundance mindset. Yes. But it was pointing to the juvenile version of it. Right. The juvenile version of it is, I'll just spend money to buy the Bentley and the universe will show up to pay for it. That's the juvenile version of it. Right. The real version of it is something much more nuanced. And it's probably not about getting more of something, exercising an abundance mindset to get more of something. It's probably about recognizing what you already have. Yeah. It's probably more about that. At least that's and this has been a 20-year. I remember specific road trips with my wife talking about this exact thing, where she was trying to point to that, and I was like, that's not the way it works. And so I think it's a hard lesson for me to learn, at least, is like, maybe I should just focus on what I already have. Right. Yeah.
Is that tithing to you? Like, is that a place where this law of the tithe can be something to work with?
Sure. Yeah. I think if we get out of the automatic habit of it and we start to recognize that, like, I almost feel like, I remember having this experience once with my bishop. We had an amazing year, and it was right after a really hard year where we lost our house, actually. And the next year was amazing, and I couldn't make sense of it. And I remember I had a check, and handing it off, I remember I physically wanted to go hand it and just say, look, do you understand what this represents for us in terms of what's happened, right? And I think if we can get closer to that connection, which is what Rabbi Stutzman was pointing to, like much closer to the connection, then we'll realize, you may as well realize full value. Is the other thing I'm sort of often think about. Like, if I'm going to spend the money, if I'm going to tithe the money, if I'm going to donate the money, why not? Like, you're going to do it anyway. Why would you do it begrudgingly? You're going to go on a trip with your kids, and you're going to spend the whole time. I can't believe how much money we're spending.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you're going to do it. If you're going to do it, why not get full value? And I think the same applies to any sort of donation. Yeah.
One of the things that I appreciate about you, Carl, is that you're willing to get into the messy stuff and talk about it. And especially with money, it feels like one of the many potential problems to our relationship with it is that we're just like silent about it. Right. You know, some people, I think some people like maybe yell about it or whatever, but I think especially in our relationship, we're much more likely to just like never say anything, you know? And in that same, it's sort of in the same way that cash, you know, should be flowing in some way. Like, it seems like you even say, like, I think it's on the back of the book, like, this book is a conversation grenade. Like, it's intended sort of like the way I feel like you live is to like, okay, we're going to like blow this up. Like, let's like start things moving. Is that an important part of dealing with money?
It's really like, it's so crazy to think like money, politics, sex, and religion. Right. Like we were taught, and 3 of them, we've decided it's fine to talk about way too much. Yeah. Right. And money seems to be the last taboo.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Wow, like there's this survey they do every year on the streets of New York where they ask people, are you more willing to talk about your finances or the intimate details of your bedroom life? People are always more willing to talk about the intimate details of their lives than money. And I think here's the reason is I think we just get unmoored so quickly because we expect it to be a math problem. And it probably should. Like, in our most enlightened state, it's just math and neutral. Yeah. But to get there, like for almost any of us, is going to be a really long slog. And so we show up to these conversations expecting it to be 2 + 2 = 4. It always does. But 2 + 2 never equals envy. Right. And so you just sort of like, sometimes I think of it as like I made this mistake once in my wife and I were in France, and I that we were looking at the cow. We were on a mountain bike ride and we were looking at the cows with the bell, that whole thing, just beautiful cows. And I was leaning up against these cables, and I was like that. And I felt something on my leg. I was like, oh, that's a little weird. And then I was like, and I was filming it. I was like, I wonder if is that an elect? And I grabbed it and it was just like, that's sometimes what I compare it to. I've got the video if anybody would like to see it. But that's what I sometimes compare it to is you go in, it's like talking about money is like touching an electric fence that you didn't know was electric. And so if we can just change it and say, this is going to be electric, right? And I think give each other permission. I've had these conversations with some of my kids recently where I'm like, look, because they've been saying, like, I realized I hadn't had some of these conversations with them. And so recently, one of my kids on a mountain bike ride, she was home from school, said, hey, we're the wealthiest family I know. And I was ahead of her, which is very important in the story, that I was ahead of my daughter on the mountain, because I will always be ahead. I'm just kidding. just that's too close to home. So anyway, I was like, I remember feeling sort of like, wealthiest family, what are you talking? What about the so-and-sos who have a jet? Like and she was sort of like, and I said something like that. And she was a little unmoored by that. And it said something nice, like, why is that the first place you go or something? And we stopped and she was like, no, what I mean is I can't remember what day it was. It was a Tuesday at 11 and we're out riding our bikes. That's what I mean by wealthy. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that led to a conversation around like, hey, what you're seeing happen is a person who was never taught how to talk about this. Like, this is a dad who was never taught how to be a dad. This is a dad who was never taught how to talk about money. Can we work on it together? And it's going to be really clumsy. So if I react in a way that seems a little unmooring, know that I probably didn't mean it. It's probably just me reacting out of a place of fear or worry or scarcity. So I think giving ourselves permission to say, hey, is it okay if we just try it? And I'll often say, like, I'm gonna ask you a question and it's gonna be really clumsy because I don't know how to ask it. And then always have a timeout rule. That's the other piece to me that's really important. And I don't always follow it. That's why my wife instituted the timeout rule. Like she can go and just like, she'll just point outside.
Yeah.
Like go throw something heavy around or go on a run or a mountain bike ride and come back. Wow. And I think that's how we approach the idea of talking about it. Because we're not going to solve this problem unless we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. This happened. Sorry, this happened. I hear you do this on the podcast over and over, and it's revelatory to me because I get so cringy. Like I'm alone listening, and I'm like cringing about like how personal it feels that like you're gonna go there with somebody, and it's been such a gift to just realize like, well, there's definitely something here about this question that is like bringing up some emotion for me that I don't even understand because I'm by myself. I don't have to answer the question even. But it's such a gift. And I wonder if that's what happens when we are open to being a little bit vulnerable, where we feel sensitivity. Yeah. Like I think what that holds is wisdom. Like it can reveal a real wisdom about our own wounds. Yeah. And I think it's so connecting to realize that in relationships that matter, it's such a gift to be able to understand those wounds together.
You're going to just mention something about that. Like that's been the most surprising thing to me about the 50 Fires Project.
Really?
Has been how deeply grateful people are for a space to talk about it.
Wow.
I've been shocked. Like somebody like Chip Gaines. Right. Who probably has people who have people taking care of the money. Right. Like how grateful, Krista Tippett.
I was going to bring hers up. Yeah.
It was crazy. Yes. That was crazy to me. Cause I even told her, I'm like, Krista, I've been listening to you since I was like, I've spent more driveway moments, waiting in the car and you have never talked about this. And she was like, never talked about it. Wow. And when I asked her about enough and she said, she invoked Relke. She was like, I'm just going to live with this question for a year. I asked Corey, my wife, she was on the show, 27 years of marriage, I think 27 or 28 at that point. And I'd never asked her about her first memory of money. Wow. And then I was telling her what my impression of her experience with money growing up was. And it was abundant and it was this whole thing. And she was like, that's wrong. And I was like, I've told that story all over the world to thousands and thousands of people. And she's like, I know, and it's wrong. And so we need to create the space for one another.
Yeah. This sort of like willingness that you have is inspiring to me as someone who tends to want to float above the real and just, theorize or whatever. Like you're willing to get into the messy details.
Yeah. Do we have time for one more story?
Yes, please.
Because that sort of ties us all back to what we talked about earlier. Like who has permission to go into that inauthentic space with you?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the inauthentic.
Oh, okay.
Right? Like when your behavior is inauthentic, who has permission? Like that's the gritty space of like, hey, you know what? No, let's go there. Right. Yeah. And we try to get up to the Tetons every year as a family, and we've been doing this since my in-laws, my wife's parents had started this, and so it's a special place for us, both sides, the Driggs and the Jackson side. And this year we were up in Driggs, and we had this amazing experience, and kids went different ways, and so it was just my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter, my wife and I in the car driving home. And my oldest daughter is in distressed private equity in New York, and so really knows her way around money and is really good with it. And my youngest daughter is 21 and also very open and is in biomedical engineering, like very thoughtful about everything she does, and also pretty willing to have conversations. We're driving home and somehow the subject of money gets brought up. And it's about like the difference between Cal Poly tuition and the University of Utah tuition. So the youngest is at Cal Poly. And so there's a lot of backstory, but it doesn't really matter that much. It's just, we got into a conversation around money, and I was driving, and we were driving to go into the park. So we were driving over Teton Pass to go into the park to go on a hike. And I had sunglasses on, luckily, and my hat, because the conversation got really sort of in a spot where I was super uncomfortable with it. And it was about sort of like, how much is there you know, my daughter was being very careful about her decision at Cal Poly. We had a deal where we'd pay for in-state tuition at the University of Utah. Not at BYU, but at the University of Utah. I'm just kidding. We had a deal. And if you wanted to go somewhere else, we would use that credit and then we'll help you figure the rest out. And so she's done this incredible job of figuring the rest out. In fact, she's over figured out. And that was kind of the thing. She's like, I think it's costing me more than the deal. You know what I mean? Like, I think I'm paying, like, I don't think you're contributing the universe. She would never use those words, but that was kind of what we were trying to figure out. She's like, is there any way to release some of this stress on me? Because I'm contributing every penny I make over the summer to my own 529 account. And I was like, amazing. Right. But, and I could feel it get a little heated and I wanted to pull out so bad. Like I felt the words coming out of my mouth. Like, I'm getting out. You guys go onto the hike. I'll walk over Teton Pass. I got to get out of this. And I luckily I just kept, kept putting him back in. And at one point, one of my daughters said, Dad, this is so funny. Isn't this your job? And I was like, and she's right. Totally right. Like I'm glad she went to that spot, but it was like, and it's going to be tension. And there's a line in the book that if I had to do the whole thing over again, right? This like 10 years worth, this is 11 years since my last book. For this one line, I would do it. Because what I realized what was going on was there were values, and part of this was my behavior, because I had us looking at ranch land. And so we drove around a couple times, like, should we buy this? Should we buy this? And somebody said something like, this is like dreamland. Why are you doing this? And so there was all this tension and competing values. And there's this essay in the book called When Values Collide, or The Values Collision. And there's a line that says, this is my favorite line of the whole book. Your values are not at war. They're in conversation. And I realized, I was like, oh, we're not at war. Like, this feels like war to me right now. It's not war. And I asked, like, if we did this thing, if we cut back and didn't do that trip, would you guys be disappointed I wasn't able to provide as your father? And they were like, no, we'd be proud of you for making that decision. And I was like, oh, no way. You know what I mean? Like, I've spent my whole life thinking you were going to be disappointed. And suddenly we're like, wow, not a war, conversation. So you fast forward, we go on the hike, we end up at lunch at Persephone's, of course, before we drive home. And I can't remember which daughter said, hey, what was the highlight of the whole trip? And we're going around the table. And I was like, we'd had a magical trip. And there's a lot of highlights. But I was like, that conversation was one of the hardest conversations I've had in my life. And I was so proud of myself and them for hanging in, right? My daughter wanted to, I'm sure everybody in the car wanted to check out. We hung in, right? And we had a conversation instead of a war. And we learned that that's what it means to live in tension. We will never resolve those. That resolve of future, present, stability, adventure, ranch land, paying down debt, like those will never get completely resolved ever. Yeah. And tension keeps bridges up. Right? Tension's okay. If we can just realize like it's a conversation, not a war. And if you start to feel like it's a war, get back to conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we, especially as church members, tend to think sequentially. It's like, okay, we're going to like push our way through this. And then it's going to be just like,
we're going to resolve it.
We're going to resolve it. Yeah. And then it's going to be peace. And it's going to be great. That's not, I think what you're pointing to is that's not how it works. Like church, community, family, it is tension.
It's never resolved. Yeah. Jeff Birmingham pointed to you get to the top of the mountain, there's just a void there. Yeah. This is the most common conversation I have right now. Really? 45 to 55-year-old, uber successful masters of the universe. They show up and say, I made it. Right? This is always a quiet, hey, can I come to Park City? Wow. I have a question for you. And they show some evidence of making it, like a balance sheet or an income statement. And then they look around and make sure no one's listening. And they say, what is this all for? Is this all there is? Wow. You know, my kids don't know me. I don't have any hobbies. And so I think that's missing the plot. Yeah. Right. And we need to get better at that.
Wow. Thank you so much. This is just so powerful. I think it's a topic I also just push away because it just feels like, I don't know. And it has been such an incredible experience to just realize that this is a real pathway to understanding, I think, where we can all use some healing. It's like it's like where something that feels very abstract meets very real life. And it's such a useful place to work, like such a useful place to work out these really human experiences. And so you've been a real mentor in that space. So thank you so much for your work and for this conversation.
You can cut this out if you need to, but thanks for sharing that. And 5-year-old Aubrey's okay.
Thank you.
Know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we can all thank that and move forward. And 21-year-old, 23-year-old Tim working 72 hours a week, like there's no line in the bush. There's no line in the bush. Love you guys. Amazing.
Love you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much for listening. We really hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Carl Richards. It was such a meaningful one for us, and we want to recommend his podcast, 50 Fires, which is full of honest and thought-provoking conversations about money, and he always has really fascinating guests. And his new book, Your Money, Reimagining Wealth in 101 Simple Sketches, is so smart and accessible and just genuinely fun to read. You can get it on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And if Faith Matters content is resonating with you and you get the chance, we would love for you to leave us a review wherever you listen. We read all of the reviews and we really appreciate the support. Thanks again for listening.